And Emily, thank you for the kind words about my upcoming retirement and parting gifts. Thank you. We have 6 more weeks to enjoy each other's company and do some fun work together. And I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to what retirement's going to be. Though I'm not exactly planning to retire. I'm planning to kind of stop doing the pastoral stuff and work with a smaller group of people and do some coaching. It should be an interesting chapter. So I've been thinking about it and wondering what it's going to look like and trying to organize my life around this new reality, but I don't know what it's going to be. I'm planning it, but I don't know. I'm watching YouTube videos, hoping somebody's come up with exactly the right answer and I could follow their lead. Mel Robbins has one, and she begins it something like this. What is the next chapter for you? Dead silence. The crowd is quiet. And then she says, what is next for you? I'm dead serious. Like, where have you been, and what are you here for? Your life has a new chapter beginning, either in your career or your relationships or your health or your life. But a new chapter is beginning, and it's starting today. What's it going to be? So I thought about that and thought, well, that's kind of true for me. I don't know if you've heard, but I'm retiring in June. So I thought I'd do a little history of like, how did I get here, and what is it that I think is going to happen next? I grew up in Harrisonburg, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley, well below the poverty line, with an abusive alcoholic father and overwhelmed mother. By the time I was a teenager, I concluded that I didn't fit this world very well, or the world didn't fit me. I didn't know if it was simply I didn't belong in my family, or I didn't belong in Harrisonburg, or I didn't belong in the world itself. But life was not like a smooth bit of sculpture. It was more like jagged glass. It hurt, and I got cut. I made my way through high school by playing in the band. That's what we called it, the high school band. I was in the symphony and the orchestra and the marching band and the pep band. Any kind of musical thing that needed to happen, I was the trumpet player who played first chair and had a whole lot of fun. I walked to school almost every day with a backpack and a gray Bundy case in which my trumpet resided. I was often the first person at the school building where the custodians were unlocking the practice rooms of the music suite. And there in this soundproof room with glass, I would practice for an hour to 2 hours before school started. I would then have my favorite class of the day, which would be band. And then when school was done, I would take my trumpet and play for an hour or two. So it would be 3 to 5 hours a day, every day. It's how I held my world together. And it was gorgeous music that we played. It was kind of the Western lexicon of what it is to do great music. We did Rodgers and Hammerstein, we did Sousa's Marches, we did Chopin, we did Haydn, we did classics. And what I loved about all of the gorgeous music we played is that the songs were beautiful and the melodies were incredible, and everybody knew exactly the part they were supposed to play, and they practiced hard and did the part exactly right. We came in together, and the orchestra conductor could say, do this, and we all did it, and then it would build to some kind of glorious climax, and we would play it and perform it, and the crowd would erupt into applause and stand. It was glorious. It wasn't so much that you had to be a great musician, that you had to know how to create great music. You just needed to know how to read music and then practice it a whole lot. It was a script that was handed you of exactly what it should sound like, and all you had to do was follow the script, and thing turned out terrific. The problem was, the classical music I played did not match the life I lived. I mean, there was no script for me. There was no one who faced what I was facing, who had gone ahead of me and could say, oh, Dennis, this is what note you play next. My life was more like the Mississippi Delta Blues, where you had to improvise. Instead of it being like an orchestra gathered on the stage, it was like a band gathered on the stage and somebody threw a grenade and blew it up. There were abusers everywhere, poverty, ignorance everywhere, dysfunction everywhere. Police and sirens and arrests everywhere. It wasn't like classical music. And the God I had heard about seemed to be a God that matched classical music, in which God was the one who explained everything that happened in the world and made sense of it. Well, I couldn't make sense of the explanations, nor the God that they said explained everything. It was kind of like if you didn't know the answer, you just said God, and everybody was supposed to bow and say, that's right. Well, I didn't get it. It's like God was the first mansplainer in the world, explaining everything, and you're making sense of it, and you shake your head and go, that makes no sense at all. Or God was the one who gave us this moral code we're all supposed to live by. But when I looked at the world, looked at my world, no one read that book. No one lived by that code. It wasn't what held the world together. It's as if instead it was God giving you a series of suggestions. It was like God was the queen and everybody bowed down and was happy the queen was there, but nobody listened to anything she had to say. And those two gods, the God of explanations and moral rule books, did not match the world in which I grew up, the world I lived in. And so I rejected that God. In high school, I met Sharon, and we've been married for 42 years. That was a great first date. Sharon introduced me to a God that was different than the God of explanations or rule books. She introduced me to the God, she said, who loved me and longed for the world to be made whole, including me. She told me of a God who loved me and longed for the world to be made whole, including me. That God I wanted to get to know. I began reading the Bible like it was a letter addressed to me, not with explanations, but more like it was a treasure. And I discovered this narrative, this unfolding plot with twists I could not have anticipated. And the characters did not behave the way they were supposed to and took an improbable path to what God had in mind for them. Now that matched. That's the Delta Blues. That's how my life was unfolding. And that God is the one I began to follow. It began to make sense. One of the key stories was this passage out of Mark, where a scribe comes to Jesus and says, what's the most important commandment? This story resonates so well because has there ever been a time when we had more options of how to live our lives and we would love for somebody to say, out of all the things I could do, out of all the people I could become, what's the most important? That's what this story is all about. Which is the thing that is the most important? And you need to know it's a scribe who asks Jesus this question. A scribe who then says, Jesus, you got it right. You nailed it. That's it. It's fascinating because scribes usually in the Gospel of Mark don't come off well in the story. They're the ones who position themselves as Jesus' enemy. They call him a blasphemer so that they can have him crucified on a cross. They say the reason he overcomes evil in the world is because he's the king of evil. He's the king demon of all the demons. They turned the crowd against him. And it's the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the elders, the religious leaders. These are the same one that over the next 70 years will teach the people to rebel against Rome. And when they do, they will incite the fury of Rome upon Israel, and Israel will be wiped off the mat, not to be seen again into our lifetime. These are the ones who are presenting themselves as giving you a solid life. But it's a fake life. It's not worthy of your attention, your desires, your love. And Jesus shows up on the peace train, and he's the conductor, and he's inviting everybody to get on board. So the scribe is one of the ones who says, what is the most important thing? And Jesus gives the answer. You know the answer, right? To love God, to love your neighbor. I love this answer. Like, this isn't hard. I can do this one. Like, I can love anybody. I can love anything. I mean, I fall in love with DRP pizza and Netflix binging. Love is not hard. I can listen to brand new music and fall in love. I can watch somebody suit and say, I really like that. I know how to take naps in the middle of the afternoon, and it's so delicious I miss appointments. I know what it is to fall in love with something and say, this is really, really good. To imagine that that is what God wants from us is to be in God's presence and simply be loved and to love. This isn't hard. I can do this. And to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if I know how to love me, I know how to love you. This isn't hard. Out of all of the junk of my life that's distracting me and saying it's the most important, to know that there's this core that I was built for, that's absolutely delicious. I mean, in high school, when I was doing music all of the time, what I had imagined my future to be is that I would go on to college, James Madison University, the greatest undergraduate school in all of America. And there I would major in music. And after I had majored in music, I would go on to get my master's degree. And after that, my doctorate. And after that, I would become a college professor on a liberal arts campus that had rolling hills. I would wear a tweed jacket with patches on the elbows, smoke a pipe, and be followed by attractive men and women, the 20 years of age, all across the campus. That was my future. But after I found out about this God, I discovered something that had been missing at the very core of my life, and it has fueled everything that's happened in the last 43 years. I mean, I began reading not just the teachings of Jesus, but the followers of Jesus, and I discovered that for the last 2,000 years, the brightest minds in the world have been writing about a false life and a true life, about a life that isn't worth pursuing and one that is. I found my tribe. I said that this life that's being described, that God's gift of life that has come in Jesus Christ, is the feast that we all have been longing for. It is the fountain out of which we find our lives refreshed. This is what we want. This is the life. That life needs a voice. It needs a community willing to embody it. It needs a courageous community willing to live as if this life is the true life. And with all the other lives being proposed, this is the one worth pursuing. And I thought I could give voice to that life. I want to be in a community doing that life. I want to be in a courageous community against all the options to say this is the one that matters most. So I changed my major from JMU from music to philosophy and religion. I ended up in seminary at Eastern Mennonite Seminary because I wanted to study with the Anabaptists who knew what it was like to not fit in this world. I got my doctorate from Wesley Theological Seminary in worship as folk art. I pastored United Methodist churches instead of going on college campuses. I went to Stanley and Page County for 3 years. Kieseltown, the feudingest church in all of the Virginia State Conference, for 4 years. I went to Gordonsville, where I was the most appreciated in my entire life, for 3 years. I did this theological act of planting a new congregation in Richmond, where I stayed for 16 years. And then 17 years ago, I got to come here. And we have been engaged in an incredible quest. You know that life sometimes presents to you its options as if life was nothing more than a never-ending quest for ever greater degrees of comfort. And it's a wasted life. There are too many people you and I know who are on the grand adventure of missing the point, of not knowing what matters most, of being absolutely lost. So for 17 years, we've been helping people find what it means to love God and to love neighbor, to courageously live God's unconditional love every day, everywhere, with everyone. It's an incredible thing. This next chapter of my life, I'm going to still be doing that. I won't be doing it with like 3,000 people on Christmas Eve. I'll be doing it with like 20 people in a more intimate conversation where I coach people and we talk. I'll be living in Frederick, Maryland, and coming to Old Town occasionally to a really good restaurant where you can sit down over a meal and have a conversation that matters about what you're doing with your life. What are you saying yes to? I don't know who my clients are going to be. I don't know what time of the day we're going to be meeting. I don't know if it'll be Zoom or Skype or face-to-face. But I know this is what I want to contribute to other people's lives. That's my next chapter. But then I want to turn the tables on you. What's the next chapter for you in your career, your family, your relationships, your health, your relationship to this church, your relationship to me? What's the next chapter? What is it that's calling you to which you can say yes or a resounding no? It's important. What is it for the love of God to move to the center of your life? Dr. Renee Brown tells a story about her daughter. Her daughter, at the end of her elementary career, is on the swim team in the community. And the coach has given her the assignment at the upcoming swim meet to do the breaststroke. She hates the breaststroke. I never mastered the breaststroke. She came up with a plan. She went to her mom and said, "Mom, I'll never win this race. I hate the breaststroke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the volleyball court next to the swimming pool on the day of the race. And I'm going to pretend when they call out my heat to not hear my age group or breaststroke, and I'm just going to play volleyball. And everybody will line up. They'll say, ready, set, go. They'll jump in the water. And when it's over, no one will be waiting for me. They just go on to the next heat. Mom, if I do that, will I get grounded? And Renee Brown said, no, honey, you won't get grounded. And you're right. You'll never win this race. But winning for you might be getting off the block and jumping in the water. So on the day of the meet, instead of staying at the volleyball court, her daughter made her way to the lane she had been assigned and listened as they said, ready, set, go, and jumped in the water. And it was ugly, a disaster. It was so bad that every other swimmer was out of the pool before she had touched the edge. When she got out, she was humiliated and ran to her mom, put her wet head on her mom's chest, and just cried. Her mom listened, and she said, Mom, I was brave and I won. And Dr. Renee Brown says, sometimes it is scary and dangerous and frightening. But isn't it scarier and more dangerous and more frightening to have never jumped off of the block into the water, to have never shown up, to have never dared to say, I love you, to not have found the courage to say yes to what's calling your name? What's the next chapter of your life? What's the smallest next step that's connected to something grand? What does it mean for you to have the love of God and the love of neighbor at the center of your life? You got it? It starts today. Ready, set, go. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.